Welcome, everyone. In today's climate, where seismic shifts in the funding landscape are encouraging university innovators to pivot towards venture capital and industry, I reached out to someone who navigated that path with vision and impact. Amir Dan Rubin began his journey in academic medical centers and has since led transformative work across healthcare. As CEO and founding managing partner of Healthier Capital, he now supports early stage companies using technology to imagine care. Before that, he scaled One Medical, took it public, and then led it through its 3.9 billion acquisition by Amazon. He's also held senior leadership roles at Optum, Stanford Healthcare, and UCLA Health, each chapter marked by innovation and very bold execution. Rather than list all the milestones, I would much rather prefer Amir shared the story in his own words, how his journey began, the inflection points along the way, and what continues to drive his passion for change. So, Amir, welcome. And if you would, please take us through your remarkable path.
Well, thank you, Dr. Shetty, for those lovely comments, and what a pleasure to be with this group. And what I thought we'd talk about today is constructing health tech models for impact and thinking about how we can make impact in healthcare, including through innovative models. And what I thought I'd do is cover a little bit of transformation and disruption that's happened maybe historically in industry and commerce, turn to the role maybe of AI in particular now in healthcare, and then talk about what it takes to have a successful transformational model. What makes something successful? How do we make change through innovative models, and leave time for discussion? So with that, let me pull up a few slides here. Just quickly, Dr. Shetty shared my background, but I think my perspective is informed by having been at both health systems, community, and academic, health plans, health services organizations, startups, big tech, and now in venture investing kind of in early stage startups. And so my perspectives will sometimes come from across the landscape here, but what I've often found is to make impact, one kind of needs to understand how the ecosystem works. And sometimes we're trying to be disruptive, but often we're trying to be disruptive from within the ecosystem. Throughout my career, I've always been very mission driven, and Healthier Capital is mission driven. And our mission is to advance healthier outcomes for all. Really, we're partnering with technology powered innovators to deliver better value and innovative solutions in healthcare. And I often like to start with kind of the problem statements that we're solving for. Certainly when one is thinking about innovative models, I often start with the stakeholders in healthcare. So if we look here on the left side, the demand side, we have consumers as a one stakeholder group frustrated with their experience, their wait times, their access, their service. Employers and payers frustrated with rising cost of healthcare and waste in the health ecosystem. But we also see frustrations on the supply side of healthcare. We see burnout in clinicians, physicians, nurses. We see workforce shortages. And then how do we coordinate this care? Increasingly is complicated into coordinated networks of care. And this challenge becomes exacerbated as we have an aging population in the US, where in 2019 we had 16% or 54 million people of the population over 65. By 2030, that 54 million goes to 73 million, so almost 20 million more. This is the baby boomers aging and busting, but they're turning 65 and hit Medicare. So one can think about all the current state problems, but it's just going to dramatically grow here. And so this is often how I like to think about when looking for solutions, looking at the core problem statements of the stakeholders. And ideally, can we solve not just one stakeholder's problems, but can we have positive sum games, not zero sum games? well, the consumer likes it, but the doctor hates it. The doctor likes it, but the insurance company hates it. Those there may be opportunities there, but sometimes I think the biggest and most impactful solutions address multiple key stakeholder needs. And at least in this world that I live in healthier capital, we're looking for often technology-powered solutions or innovative model solutions. So on the demand side, on the left side here, how do we think about innovation in consumer experience and access? This is a company that we've been involved with, Ezra, using AI and MRI imaging, and I'll come back to that. Or how do we think about the problems of employers and payers or delivering innovative clinical services? This is a company called Metaloop that is using agentic AI agents to align different data to find new clinical insights in healthcare. Or then turning to the supply side of healthcare, how do we improve administrative and clinical burdens and workflows through automation? This is the company Hyro using AI agents in contact center and member communication automation. And then how do we coordinate and bring information together across health systems and health networks? This is a company called Qualified Health that allows health systems to build generative AI apps and monitor these on top of EHR systems, as an example. And we'll dive a little bit more into these and maybe what makes these models or potentially makes these models successful or not. Let me start though with this concept of diffusion. And some of you may be familiar with the, at least by name, the economist Joseph Schumpeter, who is the economist who coined the term creative destruction. This was in the early 40s. And he talked about the role of innovation and sometimes requiring this kind of creative destruction. But he also talked about these long waves of business cycles, because sometimes these inventions lead to innovations that eventually lead to diffused technologies that build upon prior innovations and prior inventions and technologies. And so these are sometimes what are referred to as long wave business cycles. And this chart here, you might think about multiple waves if you go back in the late 1700s to water power, and we organized cities on rivers, and then we were able to use water power to have textile plants, and then we were able to use steam power, and steam power allowed us to have trains. We didn't have to live on rivers anymore so much. We can now use rail, and we can use steamships, and then we could start trading across broader geographies, and allowed us to have specialization. And then we moved into, a third wave, which really was around electrification, electricity. We also had a big innovation in chemicals, and we had the combustion engine, and we were able to mechanize and motorize a lot of things in society. And then we got into kind of the petrochemical, electronics, and aviation wave. And then more recently, over the last 50 years, we kind of have the digital internet software World Wide Web phase. And one can argue maybe we're in a variation of that phase now in kind of the AI phase and what we can do with AI and think about robotics. And the point is less to make the delineation of these phases, but to show how some core inventions start changing businesses and society and what kind of opportunities we have out there. Now, these changes don't often happen quickly, and Everett Rogers talked about adopters and adoption curve as innovators and early adopters, and then we get to the majority and laggards. But one of the interesting things that we've seen with, at least with generative AI, that's pretty remarkable, at least in terms of general adoption, at least if you look at ChatGPT, it reached 100 million global monthly active users in 2 months. So quite remarkable, and now in the billions. This is going back, almost a year and a half ago, and you see the pace of change. Now, by the way, if you have people doing dances on video online, that actually catches on pretty quickly. You see TikTok and Instagram as well. And Schumpeter also talked about invention moving from innovation to diffusion, And really, the diffusion or the early and later adaptation of technology isn't often a technology limitation. It's often limited by the speed that humans and organizations and institutions can change, right? So we have, for example, in this example from Narayan and Kapoor here, um, we have LLMs being kind of an invention, and then we're applying those in new products, and we have early adoption, sometimes being constrained by learning curves, safety, and then ultimately we're going to adapt these things as we build them into our organizational models and think about how we adapt our skills and our laws and our norms here. Um, and what we're seeing here with AI and AI diffusion is already we are seeing AI starting to perform better than humans. Whether it's in handwriting recognition, speech recognition, image recognition, reading comprehension, language, and in even writing computer code itself, which enough of us have probably played around with tools to say, yeah, of course it can read things and translate better than I can. But that was not an obvious thing. And some of these have been, taken 50 years to evolve. And so there are some breakthroughs, but a lot of these inventions build upon earlier inventions to ultimately lead to innovation, and then again that adaptation. Um, and closer in the healthcare world, some of you might have seen this paper from John Ayers. This was now a couple years ago, where he was comparing physician and chatbot responses on to questions, and basically showed that at least on the pure question and answer, the chatbot was rated not only to have higher quality but more empathetic. And again, this was kind of maybe shocking or counterintuitive, but now enough of us have played around with it and we're like, well, of course, it could read every textbook, it can answer the question technically, and it has more time. It has unlimited time to say, oh, I'm so sorry, Amir, you felt that way. That must have felt awful. Tell me more, right? Whereas the physician may not have the time and gets right to the point. So, very quickly, what might have seemed shocking or counterintuitive, maybe to some of us now seems obvious. And what seemed, again, counterintuitive or shocking or hard to imagine, now we see these LLM models out of the gate with no fine tuning, basically nailing the US MLE medical exams here. And again, now that we know enough about these transformer models, if you load up enough textbooks into the model and say, here's questions, answer these questions, it's not surprising, but it's quite amazing seeing how we have built upon these technologies and starting to see this diffuse. And some of you might have seen this recent paper in Nature using a model, Amy from Google, on basically differential diagnosis. And basically what these researchers showed here, McDuff et al., was basically the models, again, maybe not so surprising, can get the diagnosis better and more accurate than the humans. Interestingly, what these charts showed is actually when humans are assisted by the models, that's the yellow line here, they actually do worse than just following the models. So at least this paper would imply that human intuition to override the model was incorrect. You would have been better with just going with the model. And again, these papers aren't perfect, but again, maybe not surprising to think about, gee, the computer has probably seen more examples than I have. Now, the computer hasn't seen what hasn't been said. Maybe the facial expressions, what question wasn't answered. So again, these are one-dimensional assessments, I'd say here, but we're seeing this technology be very powerful and diffusing. And then we're seeing organizations starting to evaluate and score these models, and these models are getting better and better. And we're also seeing this technology starting to diffuse into our real world. And if you look in healthcare organizations, kind of this is a matrix from my colleague Travis May on kind of market readiness versus technology readiness, but you're seeing automation in scheduling and call centers and chat bots and scribing and revenue cycle and medical imaging, already existing out there. And maybe I'll talk about a few of these. For example, this is a company we're invested in and involved with called Hyro in contact center automation. So a patient or member of a health plan can go to a website, a call center, mobile app, and they can ask a question, they can message a question, and the system can break down that question into multiple components. It could then answer that question. It can go all the way through the EHR and book that appointment. It could do follow-ups. And maybe what I'll do here is, let me play a little audio clip here of an example here from Hyro.
Hello, and thank you for calling the KidsX Medical Center. I'm Barney, your virtual agent. If you have a medical emergency, please hang up and dial 911. How may I assist you today?
I need to cancel my son's MRI appointment, but I can't access his account.
Happy to help. Let's start with your son's MRI appointment and afterwards with his MyChart account. First, I need to verify a few details.
So you see the system could already parse, and it's going to different places for the answers.
2009.
And the patient's zip code, please.
94612.
Thank you. Please hold while I verify the details. Great. The identification was successful. I see you have an appointment with our MRI technician on Wednesday, May 21st, 2025 at 11:15 a.m. Is this the one you're referring to?
Yeah, that's the one.
Got it. Just so you know, there's availability for rescheduling at our clinic.
And the system's now thinking about rescheduling.
Sure, let's reschedule.
Okay.
Okay, I can schedule your appointment for either this coming Thursday morning or Saturday.
So let me stop the example here, but this is, this is live and actually, what is happening in healthcare organizations. Vivek, I saw your hand. Did you want to add a comment here?
Knowing you, I'm sure you have HIPAA built into it, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. HIPAA built into it, and we'll, talk a lot about kind of security and AI safeguards. You need to be able, if you ask a question, to know the source or citation. This approach is using kind of LLM approaches for language understanding and converting speech to text and text to speech. The actual answers are based off the organization's answers. There is some pre-built data, but you can tune this to the organization. And so some of it's LLM, but some of it's based on using what's called a knowledge graph. So it's not just, if I ask where the parking for the GI clinic at UCLA is, I don't want the GI clinic where, Stanford is, right? I need this, and I need the same answer every time. And part of the challenge here is managing the safety, but then also integrating with Epic and Cerner and the phone systems. And so absolutely thinking about all of those issues as well. And that really gets to the broader diffusion question. We need to have the regulatory, the safety, the repeatability, the explainability, the controls. But this is indeed happening. We're seeing a lot of expansion in the ambient documentation space. This was a study from Peterson Institute came out recently in terms of evaluating, hey, how are these ambient scribe systems working? And in short, while one can debate what the exact ROI is, we are seeing clinicians liking it and positive impact there. And I don't think we're going back. In the AI and imaging space, we're involved with a company called Ezra, which was recently acquired by a company called Function. Ezra now can do a full body MRI for under $500. And it can do it in 22 minutes. So this is using shorter time in the scanner. Picture, if you will, gets fuzzier. It's doing image correction, comparing to databases. And Ezra has gone through the FDA clearance process. So these for brain, for neuro and body MR, has looked at many, many studies, blinded, put it in front of radiologists, looked at ultimate results, and find that its results are better or equal. I would posit to guess in many health systems, a chest X-ray is $400. And so what does it mean when you can go straight to an MR? Ezra believes it can get certain scans.
Christina Flojel or Christina.
Maybe for, see, AI is ever present here. But what if we want to screen early for ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer, glioblastoma? What if that's a 5-minute scan? What if we just compare a definitive scan against how it changes over time? These are the kind of things we can start to do with this technology. We're also seeing AI diffuse in analytics. This is a company called Metaloop that is using AI agents, agentic AI, to automate complex clinical analytics questions. And you can type questions in natural language here. For example, how many patients who experienced a stroke had rehab therapy within 90 days following stroke? And you can run this on your own data, on claims, on EHR data. And the system is smart. First, it's going to, and this might take you quite a bit if you were doing this on your own, writing SQL queries, pulling data, cleaning up that data, looking for outliers. This is doing all of that. In each of these steps, there is an agent writing Python code to do this. So first thing it says is, well, when you said stroke, do you mean a cerebral hemorrhage? And when you read rehab, do you mean PT and OT? You probably don't mean alcohol or drug rehab. Is this correct? Do you accept this? Do you want to edit this? Here's how I'm going to pull the data. Does this look correct? Would you like to edit this? Here's my statistical plan. I'm going to count these many patients. I'm going to look at the proportions of these patients. I'm going to do confidence intervals. Does this look correct? Here's the output plan. I'm going to do a histogram and a bar chart. Is this what you like? And then here are the various ICD-10 codes for cerebral hemorrhage, PT, and OT. Does this look correct? And then underlying this, it then is running this, and it says, here's the answer. This is actually real data on a 50 million claims data set. And this is how many patients received rehab post 90 days in stroke. Here's confidence intervals. By the way, if you want to write this up or try to submit a grant to NIH or elsewhere, there's a few modules here you can click, and you can say, here's my hypothesis, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'd like to study. And then underlying this is a neural network. So the more queries that are written on this, it doesn't take anybody's data, but it's learning from the queries. So it can do very sophisticated biostatistics, statistics, and it starts thinking like a researcher. So you could think about this almost as, to be provocative, an autonomous research agent. It's not going to be fully autonomous, but it can certainly help automate. And then thinking about how we're leveraging AI in other arenas. This is a company we're involved with, Amai Health. This is in serious mental illness. This is a serious mental illness clinic business. This is patients discharged post-schizophrenia, psychosis, go to this kind of medical home. And they've got some partnerships and alignments with health systems, New York Presbyterian and Stanford and some others. They're also in Los Angeles, connected to UCLA and Cedars-Sinai and amongst others, and Raleigh-Durham and launching in other places. But in addition to the physical, they also are building technology where patients can engage, but increasingly have AI-driven digital support with a human in the loop, but kind of 24/7 engagement. And, you know, we're going to think about AI kind of like a web company. Remember when we called a company, oh, it's a .com? Like, doesn't everybody have a website now? So this technology is going to diffuse when I think we'll be less talking about AI companies, but like you're not leveraging these capabilities in your company. And then when we think about diffusion across organizations, if you look at big healthcare organizations, you see health systems and other health C-suite execs seeing the power of Gen AI in employee efficiency and revenue growth. You see physicians already saying, you see from 2023 to 2024, according to the AMA, a recent survey, from 38 up to 66% of physicians stating that they currently use at least one of 15 AI use cases presented here: documentation, discharge, translation, summarizing research, assisting in diagnosis, chart summaries, etc. And I think also if you look at consumers, consumers increasingly are thinking about healthcare availability and affordability. Many of us work in healthcare. How many of you can get an appointment today? How about tomorrow? How about this week? How many would it take you months to get a specialty appointment? So as we see here, the increase from 2024 to 2025, and I think this problem will continue to get exacerbated we have all kinds of comparisons, the US to other countries, but actually when you think about our provider roles relative to other countries, we don't have more physicians per 10,000 persons. And so I think we might be thinking and need to be more thinking about how will we augment these capabilities? How will we increase this access? I used to be CEO of a company, One Medical, that made on-demand primary care access very easy, both with digital health and in-person care. Now you can sign up on Amazon for less than $9 a month. Actually, this month, a $6 special. There you go, $30 off for less than $6 a month. You can get One Medical membership. You could get a response within a minute or two, synchronous video or asynchronous. And then if you go to physical offices, we bill insurance with very high customer service. So the current state is being pushed by these new models. And when you ask consumers, and this was an article I saw in Harvard Business Review in 2024, what were they using Gen AI for? They were using it for generating ideas. Now, number one in 2025 was therapy, companionship, organizing my life, finding purpose, healthier living. So how we think about what's health and what's healthcare and where it's delivered, is it really in your app? Is it really in your walls? The consumer may not wait for us to get our answer. The consumer may say, I could book this MRI, I could get this lab test, I could ask this agent, I can get companionship. And then as we think about these agents, agentic AI, it's interesting. I saw this Wall Street Journal article the other week showing that, well, what if the agent is going to do your shopping for you or try to book that appointment? We saw Hyro automating some of this. Well, the agent, as this analyst from Gartner said, AI agents aren't necessarily attracted to the images or visuals designed to elicit an emotional response in people. The agent doesn't care about the branding and the logo. So actually, how will the agents who work for us respond? They may not be schnookered in the same way, good or bad. But this is a world that we're probably evolving into. And a world where kind of old predictive models, does the patient have sepsis? It's kind of one question with a classifier gives us an answer, yes, no. And now in these new generative AI models, they're more complicated. We're trying to replace, if you will, at some level, human work. Draft a referral letter. So wow, there can be many kind of inputs, many kind of prompts, and there can be many types of outputs and many potential concerns or considerations on accuracy, conciseness, relevance, bias, etc. So we need to think about how do we have controls in these arenas, and we have some regulatory controls. For example, Ezra took its medical AI, the AI in imaging, through the FDA, and it went through the AI as a medical device process. But much of AI and much of what we're doing in electronic medical records and elsewhere are kind of non-device clinical decision support. So increasingly, we need to think about how do we think about safety and controls, and outfits like the Coalition for Health AI and the National Institute of Standards and Technology are kind of promulgating approaches. And really, these are really kind of safety approaches. We probably can't, maybe shouldn't, just shut these things down. But how do we think about, hey, pre-deployment, how do we test these? And after we deploy, how do we evaluate whether they're working? Is there drift in the models? Are they consistent? And what do we do post-deployment? And we're invested in a company called Qualified Health that allows health systems to build such Gen AI apps quickly on top of their electronic health record, kind of a no-code or low-code approach, and then have a governance function on these. Are there errors? Is PHI or PII exposed? Can we check for drift in the models or bias or hallucinations? And let's have a dashboard to track these things. And you can imagine not just a few apps, but hundreds, if not thousands, and needing to have these kind of controls. Do you get the same answers on 23 versus 24-year-olds, let alone other criteria? Does the answer change over time? These are things we'll have to monitor and control. Well, all of these create tremendous new opportunities and tremendous new business opportunities. And let's turn a little bit. If the first half we talked about some of the problems of stakeholders, of consumers and employers and payers, as well as providers and health systems, and how we're seeing disruption and diffusion of this disruption through AI being implemented. It's taken, in some cases, decades. But how do we translate this to new models? Often you have to start with, is there an opportunity? Is there an economic opportunity? Is this sustainable? Who will pay for this? And this is a chart from some friends of mine at McKinsey. And at the bottom, this is basically showing the EBITDA margin, the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So this is how much earnings or cash flow. And basically by 2028, with the darker colors implying further growth, and you see here, there's 100 billion in earnings projected in 2028 in this kind of health tech arena. That's going to be more than the whole payer category and the pharmacy services category. Now, still a lot in care delivery and in pharma and biotech. And drilling down into this health tech space in particular, we see growth on care management, disease management, telehealth, revenue cycle, clinical information systems, medical imaging, provider available enablement, financial accounts. So the kind of services we've been talking about in some of those examples. And when we look, at least in the last few years, where investments have gone in, kind of if you think in the health tech arena, you see investments in treatment of disease, non-clinical workflow, monitoring disease, on-demand healthcare, clinical workflow, and consumer health. Kind of the areas we talked about before. And maybe not surprisingly, these are kind of, if you categorize investments by clinical conditions, these are really high prevalence conditions: mental health, cardiovascular, oncology, weight, cardiometabolic type issues, reproductive health, and diabetes. And so finally, then, if we're going to think about building innovative models to address these stakeholder problems with this great technology, we're considering where there are revenue and economic opportunities. What are some of the criteria that folks like Healthier Capital think about? Well, I often start with the key stakeholders. Who has the problem, and can we solve their core problem? I like things that are non-zero sum game, right? Can you address the needs of multiple stakeholders? What is the value proposition you're delivering? It may be technology, it may be an innovation model. Why this? Why does anybody care? Is there a big enough market? People say, oh, in the US, we spend, close to 5 trillion, 18+% of the GDP. Yes, but the thing that you're targeting, is that a big enough market? Is it multiple billions? And then we often talk about product market fit. Whatever you're proposing to do, does the market want it? Is there some evidence they want it? And then is there a way for you to do it in an economically sustainable way? Whether it's a for-profit enterprise or even a non-profit enterprise, is it economically sustainable? Is there an economic model, a revenue model? How will you acquire customers and retain those customers? A lot of businesses often, I've seen, fall on this point. It's not necessarily, oh, we're going to build this app and people are going to love it and it's going to do great. It has great margins and we'll get paid for it. Well, how will people know you exist? How will you distribute it? Will you have to spend money? Oh, no, it'll just go viral. Oh, that's interesting. What does that mean? How are you going to do that? And then what will be your sales or contracting approach? Oh, we want to sell to health systems or the health plans or employer benefits leaders. Well, do you understand how to sell into them, how they buy, how are their decisions made? What is the growth plan? How fast will this grow? So those are kind of some of the, I'll call it a little more the external factors. And on the right-hand side, maybe a little bit more of the internal factors. Do you have the team that can do this, or can you pull the team together? How scalable is this idea or solution? Can you replicate it? Can you execute and sustain it over time? What is the margin profile over time? How much money do you need to do this, and how capital efficient? Is it just burning cash, or are you just lighting cash on fire? And then ultimately investors will say, what do you want for this? How much does it cost to invest in this, and what might my returns be? And what's the future disposition of this company? What happens, and what are the risks? What are the risks we know about, and what might be some scenarios that could create risks? So these are some of the kind of key investment criteria that we think about. Excuse me. And coming full circle here, then, again, diffusion is limited by the speed of human organizational and institutional change. So we started talking about Schumpeter's disruptive innovation, moving it from inventions to innovations to diffusion. But then we saw how recently we've had really interesting and exciting uptake and diffusion in some of this technology. But we need to think about how we do this safely in a secure fashion, in a trustworthy fashion. And then as we think about innovative models, thinking about how we address the needs of key stakeholders, the consumers, employers, the providers and team members and health networks. Are they solving a key problem? And do they have economic models, distribution models, and execution models that are sustainable? So I know that was a whirlwind there, and I'd like to pause here and maybe open it up, Dr. Shetty, to any discussion or questions here.
Well, I mean, this is so fascinating and energizing. I cannot in my lifetime think of anything more extraordinary than what is happening out there with the exponential growth in AI and how it is used. Let me open it up to some of the members who have joined today. I have many questions, but let me ask them. Any of you raise your hand? If not, let me go ahead and maybe that will motivate them to ask. So you have been in academic medical centers, and we have so many brilliant innovators. But this paradigm of taking it to market, of taking innovation, productizing it, and creating impact in a way that society is willing to pay for it, that's a different paradigm. And you clearly have a very well articulated framework with all these elements of how to productize innovation. Uh, any high level thoughts of how do people make those transitions? How do they approach you in the first place?
Yeah, well, I think often what we find is people start in the best way with a problem statement. We often see a lot of entrepreneurs and innovators and say, I saw this problem. Maybe I'm a clinician and I lived this problem. You know, maybe a family member had this problem. Or sometimes we say, no, I'm neither. I just would like to help solve healthcare. We see all the above. And maybe I bring some perspectives from outside of healthcare. You know, we've solved this plus or minus in some other industries. Why don't we solve this in healthcare? So often I think the best place to start is the problem statement. And then often another good kind of design thinking idea is to not fall in love with your first solution. So, you know, often it's good to start wide, you know, like, hey, here's a problem. I think this is the answer. Could be, you know, but you know, is it a different staffing model or different reimbursement model? Is it different technology? Or if it's in the medical device, could it be a drug? Could it be a pill? Could it be a procedure? Right? You know, think what are the alternative approaches, the substitutes, what else is out there? But often it starts with kind of, and that's what people might call this product market fit. Then, okay, I think I have a problem statement. I think the problem statement is big enough. I think I have a solution. Then you can often start talking to people, even without a real innovation yet. You could have a prototype that could be just, if it's technology, it could be just wireframes or drawings, or it could even just be, here's what we're going to do. And you see early stage companies do just that. And they'll sometimes raise money on just that. Hey, we think we understand this problem. We think we're qualified to do it. Here's what we want to do. And the best one said, and we've not only talked to these people, some have said, and we've pre-sold a few people who said, I'm willing to do it. You know, but you can, the further along that chain you go, but I think whether it's starting a new company, working on an existing company, or even just doing continuous improvement, it often starts with understanding the problem. And so the better one understands the problem statement, how the multiple stakeholders fit in, the reimbursement world, the distribution, then often the more robust or impactful a solution one can find. I see, Jesselyn, you came off here. Nice to meet you. You might just briefly introduce yourself and ask your question. And I think you're still on mute.
You're on mute. Mhm.
Oh,
There you
sorry,
go.
muted in two places. Thanks so much for a wonderful talk. I'm Jessie Dunn. I'm an assistant professor at Duke in biomedical engineering and biostatistics. It was super interesting to hear about because one of the challenges that we often run up against in the implementation of the technologies that we develop is this sort of economic viability. And one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot these days is public health and sort of the governmental role in public health and thinking about sort of who pays. And even more specifically, sort of getting into the cardiometabolic disease space, thinking about diabetes as a great example. So my specific question for you is in thinking about these different payment models. I guess it's sort of a two-part question. One is when you're trying to develop a solution that's more public health oriented in this question of who pays, when you have generally like a government payer, how do you think about that? And then the second part of that is given that that changes over time, reimbursement models change. Is that something that you've seen kill technologies before, create new technologies? How do all these pieces fit together in this public health sort of model?
Oh, that's a big question. And I'm not sure I have the answer, but let me throw some ideas out there. So, I mean, I think you're positing a great challenge, which is when, the benefits are diffuse across a broad population and over a long period of time, cardiometabolic disorders, right? The ROI, if you're a health insurer, a health plan of, hey, better practices in childhood will pay off when you're in your mid years. I'm probably not going to reap the benefits that of if I'm an employer or health insurer. I may not reap the benefits that, ironically, if I'm a governmental payer either, right? The irony is sometimes if people die quicker, at least we may save money. Not saying that government's goal is just to save money, of course, but so that's a really big challenge, right? When you have this, I don't know if it's an example of a tragedy of the commons or a positive externality or all the above. So I do think one needs to think about creative models there. Sometimes it could be coalitions. Sometimes, I think about like, gosh, well, if every health plan in the market did this, then we'd all benefit from this. And then, yeah, we'll get churn in our plan or the other plan, but ultimately we'll have lower cost across all our plans. I've always thought like, gosh, could we pull that off? Let's, you have to do this in a right way that's not an antitrust kind of thing. But like if we could, if you will, collude on avoiding diabetes in the future, wouldn't we all benefit from that? Even though, Amir might churn from plan A and be in plan B and plan C, somebody's going to get the benefit there of that. So I think those are great models to innovate on. And I think it also shows that sometimes the innovation is not just the solution. We may actually have those answers. It may be in the distribution or the organization or the reimbursement model. I think the second part to your question, does the uncertainty of those models and the change of those models jeopardize a lot of these innovations? Absolutely. And we see, new models succeed and fall based on, for example, reimbursement, whether it's on the Medicare side, we have Medicare Advantage, which is, close to 50% of seniors are in Medicare HMO, largely because there is a reimbursement model that kind of works in the market. You could debate, you could tweak it, but in essence, in general, when you ask seniors in Medicare HMOs if they like it, they do. And the market's reasonably functional. And you've actually seen that in dual eligibles, Medicare and Medicaid. You actually see pretty functional models there, largely because of the kind of Medicare capitation reimbursement model, which allows the innovators or the companies to keep the savings and redistribute those savings. Whereas in Medicaid programs, federal and state combined programs, you create savings. The payments basically get rebased to the health plan each year. There is no real concept of that retained savings. So those are very slim margin plans. And so harder to do some of these innovative models. Oh, we'll drive to the home, we'll do this, do that. Well, if you reduce cost in next year, just the plan gets less and it gets basically a point or two of margin on top of claims, which is how a lot of those are kind of set up. And doesn't mean there isn't innovation, doesn't mean there isn't room. So the way these reimbursement models are set up absolutely drives, so I'll use an example of My Health, the serious mental illness business I showed. Typically for these SMI, serious mental illness patients, about 1 in 4 get readmitted in 30 days. They're approaching 0 readmitted in 30 days. So they were able to go to health plans, including Medicaid, and said, I'll save you money next month. Of the 1 in 4 that was readmitted, this one will be 0. So it's tens of thousands. So I can show you in-year savings versus maybe let's counter that to the diabetes prevention or, even reversal, like a longer time frame. So those absolutely impact kind of the models and how they work, but also shows maybe creative approaches for nonprofit approaches, for collaborative approaches, for policy approaches as well. Yeah, thanks, Jessie Lynn. Great question.
Thanks so much. Super helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, those of us stuck in this phase of digital health, because we always combat the beyond the pill, because everything there seems to be a medication for, and we in digital health, as you're doing with mental health, is kind of self-care, digital interventions, and they don't quite have the resonance in the way the healthcare reimbursements are set up. Just kind of curious, like what have been your struggles with some of these mHealth projects that you have embraced at Healthier Capital? And also, when approached by university innovators, what are the top 2 or 3 questions you usually ask?
Yeah, I would say at least the things that we've been dealing with in Healthier Capital, and maybe channeling my role as CEO at One Medical, being like in that startup hat, it often is, how do you navigate the multiple stakeholders, deliver value to them in an economically sustainable way, get the distribution and sales, and then ultimately execution. I remember we had taken One Medical public, and we had done an IPO, and some analyst said, well, can anybody do what you're doing? I said, anybody can do it who's taken 15 years, raised $1 billion, and it can execute in 30 different cities and 25 states consistently at a 90 net promoter score and answer and respond to patients within a 90th percentile in 2 minutes. Anybody who can do that can do it, right? Like, so, eventually you get to execution on these things, and have you built systems and processes and teams. So that part is, as I sometimes like to say, non-trivial, right? And so when one is talking with startups, it really is kind of those criteria. It's like, hey, are you addressing the needs of stakeholders? Great. Do you have an offering that people really want and must have? Okay. Is that market big enough? Okay. How are you going to actually sell and distribute that and get to people? All right. Do you have an economic model that will sustain it? Fine. And then can you actually execute on this? And then as an investor, do I like the price, so to speak? But if you've done all the rest, then the price solves for itself a little bit. But stringing all of those things is challenging. And then the reality is, as you're going along, you have external shocks. The reimbursement changes, the regulation changes, the technology changes. We go from an interest rate environment where the Fed's fund rate was 0 to 5.25, and sitting at 4.75, which means if you're a company that your earnings are into the future, you're a startup, you're probably not generating that EBITDA, that cash. Well, if the cost of that capital is now higher, those future earnings are worth less dollars today. People discount those dollars. So, and you're probably riskier than just the federal funds rate. You're probably a multiple of that. So basically, you went from a multiple instead of 0 to make the math easier. Let's say you were 3 times as risky as the market. All right, so if the market was 1%, was I at 3%? And again, discount rates for riskier companies were higher than that, but they were in the single digits. Now you're like, okay, if you're 3 times 5%, are you 15%? Maybe investor expects 20 or 25 or 30 or 50%. It's a lot riskier because you don't have any cash and it's far into the future. And so that also impacts ultimately pricing, your ability to raise money. So there's also these macroeconomic factors that also will impact companies. So these are all kinds of things you see as you're looking at startups.
In the biotech world, you have large venture capital groups that actually take small products that are being developed in labs and then bring their engineers, bring in their finance people and do market analysis and then take it to scale, like Moderna being a good example. Is something like that happening in digital health?
Yeah, it's a good question. You are seeing that. You see innovation come out of universities, absolutely, and you see companies starting up out of universities or licensing that technology. The company I showed you, Metaloop, that founder actually was a serial entrepreneur, Canadian, originally had an EHR, electronic health record, he developed and sold there, then was on faculty at Stanford and was a clinical researcher, and so said, gosh, I really should be able to automate a lot of this work. And he had a child with a condition that he wasn't really getting the answer, and he was like, I think I should be able to find these answers quicker and faster with this technology. And then that's in other examples, actually qualified health, that software tool I showed that allows one to build Gen AI apps on top of electronic health records and monitor. That was another Stanford associated member. Actually, he was a med student when I was the CEO at Stanford, and then did a bunch of other stuff. And again, a lot of this was people seeing the problem statements from the worlds they knew and the worlds they were living, and thought about how can I solve some of these problems. And in these instances, these are both leveraging AI, but it doesn't have to be AI or technology. A little bit to Jesselyn's question, sometimes it's an innovative model, an innovative business model. MI Health is leveraging technology, but really it's a clinical care model. It's combining psychiatry, psychology, long-acting injectable meds, peer support in a comprehensive way. And typically today you have medical benefits, behavioral benefits, and not really social benefits. And they said, well, if we combined all of that together and did make it disparate, that would probably work better than just giving somebody discharged with schizophrenia a discharge summary. Here's a printout. Like, you have, manage this. They're like, yeah, that's probably not going to work as well as if this whole thing is coordinated. So sometimes, so yes, these insights can often come, and often do come from people seeing the problems, living the problems. You see that a lot actually in kind of medical device and great medical device breakthrough, where people who were doing these are like, why is this tool so difficult to use? And you have great surgeons and others who pioneered a lot of these devices because they were working in these arenas and they saw these problems.
Yeah, healthcare is a problem-rich environment, but the issue is the implementation, the execution. And most of us are not trained. We are trained to answer hypothesis, and that often is the end of our NIH grants. But take it out and execute, and it's a very different framework. Now, from your vantage point, are there themes or technologies that are drawing most of the VC attention in digital health?
Well, I showed a slide there from a group called Rock Health in terms of where kind of the investments were going. And, if I'll go back to my framework of the key stakeholders, I think it's distributed, and certainly at Healthier Capital, we look at both across the demand side. We looked at kind of things that are serving the consumer, like Function Health, and Ezra was kind of a direct-to-consumer approach, or solutions like Amai, which is in serious mental illness. Actually, that arguably serves multiple stakeholders, but like solves a key problem for payers trying to coordinate care and innovate care. Certainly solves a problem for the patients. But then on the supply side, we talked about things like Hyro, contact center automation. We talked about things like ambient listening and scribing. These are kind of solving workflow, staffing issues, analytics, kind of solving pop health and other. So I think it's pretty well distributed. I would say in each of these arenas, there's usually a different distribution channel. Selling direct to consumer can be hard. Selling to businesses can be hard. Selling to doctors and nurses and hospitals can be hard. And selling to health systems and health plans can be hard too. So understanding those different themes are important. Well, I know we're at time here. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all. Hope this helped share some insights. And feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and keep me posted. It's an amazing group here doing incredible stuff. I think the future of healthcare is in your hands. So we're looking for you all to think about the new innovative models and help solve these problems. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
I mean, thank you again so much for all the wisdom and the 40,000 feet view. I hope we'll have opportunity to bring you back. We have a pipeline of wonderful, talented innovators, and this will energize them. Thank you again for making the time and joining us, Amir.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Have a great day, everybody.
Be well. Bye.